Welcome to the Hearts Entwined podcast. In this podcast, we'll be having discussions around the secrets which attract lasting, healthy, fulfilling relationships, creating a healthy mindset, and what women should know and understand about men. Introducing your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts, relationship expert, trainer, speaker, and best-selling author of the Cupid's Bow technique. Lyn's mission is to have a positive impact in reducing divorce, domestic violence, and suicide.
Welcome to the Hearts Entwined podcast. This is your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts. And today, listeners, I'm very excited to have on Lois, I should say. It's because I've got a daughter called Louise. Sorry about that. Lois Wagner. And she's your friend for forgiveness. I love that expression, your friend for forgiveness. So how did your friend for forgiveness come about, Lois, when you sort of said that, this is what I and who I am?
Well, it's quite a long story, so I won't go into all the detail, but I started forgiving many years ago now, but the big forgiveness was I was attacked and raped and left for dead. And 14 years after that event, I went to the prison where the rapist was incarcerated, and I forgave him for that crime. And it was just the most rewarding and amazing experience for me because it set me free from that event. And ever since that day, I've never been triggered or had any bad memories as a result.
And it is literally, not so much forgiving the crime, but forgiving, so that you can move on and take your power back, isn't it?
Exactly. And that's exactly what I said in the forgiveness talk. I said to him, I hand back the responsibility to you and I take our power. And it really does free. When you break that bond that is tying you to the individual or to the situation, you really do break that bond.
And it stops, I suppose, us going into that victim mentality and then letting it impact any sort of really horribly traumatic event like that, letting it impact our lives in a negative way and, wallowing. And sometimes, I know it's a very serious crime because I've been as well a survivor of that myself. So, I'm not demeaning that it is a very serious crime, but, sometimes I do see people, who have been through similar trauma that literally carry that throughout their lives and let it negatively impact the whole of their lives until the day they die.
Yeah, it's a journey that we go on, a matter of understanding where you are on that journey. Because when you're in the victim stage, emotions of hate and fear and disgust and blame and guilt, that you can consider forgiving in the early stage because you're in a bad place and you've got to process before you can move on. So you can only forgive once you've dealt with all those negative. Once you do forgive, it really breaks you from those negative. I never have those emotions again. Nothing triggers me back into that negative mode relating to that incident.
So did you have external help and support to get you to the point where you were able to, literally go and visit your perpetrator and forgive him? Or did you work through that yourself internally?
There was a couple of, I did see a therapist at one point, 4 or 5 sessions, which I didn't find terribly beneficial. But what really helped me was my sister, who was a alternative healer, and she just advised me that I should go inside and find the answers. And I found the answers, but we didn't discuss forgiveness. That just came later. It was quite an interesting story because I was living outside the country and I was going home for my first holiday. I'd been out the country for 14 years. And in those 14 years, I'd never considered this individual. I'd never thought about him. Was he okay? Was he dead, alive, back on the streets? And I was coming home and I thought, let me contact the authorities and find out what has happened to this guy. And they said to me he was up for parole the day after I arrived in the country. And in addition, the law had just changed, allowing what they call victims of crime to attend a parole hearing. So the coincidence was so great, had to go. the advice of friends. And one friend said to me, well, if you're going, you might as well forgive him. And I said, what? Don't be stupid. I'm never going to forgive this man. But I did some research. I went to Mr. Google, and Mr. Google gave me lots and lots of information, which was too much information, but it got me thinking. And so I went to the prison and I forgave him.
How old were you when this traumatic event happened?
I was 40 when I was raped, and I was 54 when I forgave.
Yeah, I can relate so much, because I was 15 and 18. It happened to me twice, and it was 42 when I first sort of started my healing journey and was becoming more aware of what I needed to do, and even actually spoke about it. So and a few years after that, before I was in a position where I felt able to forgive and move on and let it all go.
Well done. Not many people can claim that, and it really is so powerful.
It is massively powerful, and I never like to hear people call themselves rape victims. For me, I'm not a rape victim, I'm a rape survivor. And not only that, but a rape thriver if it comes to it, and I live my life to the full. And like with yourself, I don't let, what happened to me be an excuse for not living my best life.
Absolutely. And being, as I said, you have to be that victim at first because something happened to you, and you do have those emotions, and it's natural to have those emotions. And as you move on, you get your resilience, and you get creative and courageous, and you become the survivor. But surviving is still a struggle. But at least you're negotiating and discussing and making meaning of what happened. And then you start forging forward into a new reality with new thoughts and dreams and aspirations. And that's when you start thriving. And it is only when you're in that phase that you can really consider forgiving. You can't forgive when you're a victim, or even when you're a survivor, because you're still coping with the situation. And moving through those phases, everybody goes at a different pace. As I say, it took me 14 years. But I like to say, let's move you through quicker. Let's not wait 14 years.
Yes.
Let's start the process sooner and work through it and find your freedom a lot earlier.
Absolutely, because when we think about it, when these events happened to us, for me, it was in the 70s, there wasn't like the help and support or the awareness in those days to help people move through it quicker. You just had to fumble about and find your own way.
Yeah, I remember I went to a rape crisis meeting, and there was a mother at the meeting, and both of them had been raped, separate incidences, but like 10 years previously. And they were walking around with huge big dogs and guns, and I looked at them and I thought, that's pathetic. That was my immediate reaction. And then, of course, there I was, 14 years later, still struggling. So, yeah, I just wish people would learn that you can move through it quicker.
And it doesn't take years and years of therapy, literally you can move through it quite relatively quickly these days with the right help and support, and especially from people like ourselves who have done it, been there and wear the t-shirt now for coming through it all, but albeit, decades later. Just know that, if you are and can relate to this situation or these situations, anything like being similar, then, there are ways of moving through these stages a lot quicker and with a lot more effectiveness and help and support and guidance than what we did or didn't receive in our era, so to speak.
But it's important that you know that there are hundreds of different therapies, and you've got to find the one that works for you. Not is going to work for everybody, and so experiment, try that one until you find what works for you, and know that you're not alone. Even though your journey is your journey and you go through it at your own pace using your own modalities, there are people out there to support you, to encourage you, and to hold your hand through it. So you're not alone. That's very important to know that.
I know for me, Lois, you know, my relationships were very negatively impacted, you know, on my journey. I can look back now and join the dots and see how my relationships were really negatively impacted on the back of what happened to me. What happened for you? Did you have your relationships negatively impacted by the experience?
Well, I was had a lover at the time who was out of the country so when he came back, he didn't know about it. And when we tried to get intimate, and so I told him why, and he left and he never came back. And but it didn't take me long. I decided that I wasn't going to let this define me. I enjoyed sex, and I wasn't going to let this stop me enjoying sex. And so I didn't take too long before I found a new man.
That's great to hear, because for me, I can, you know, honestly say, hand on heart, I didn't cope with it very well. You know, I did go through a bit of a promiscuous phase, you know, on the back of not having that self-worth or feeling ashamed and guilt about it and looking for love through sex, you know, and that was me for a phase. And certainly as well, I attracted some, you know, unhealthy relationships, as well as healthy relationships with which I then self-sabotaged on the back of, you know, again, not feeling worthy of having a great relationship. So I'm glad you didn't have to go through too much of that.
It's interesting what you say about being promiscuous, because before this happened, when I got divorced, my divorce led me to promiscuity. That was the way I was coping with being abandoned by my husband. So yeah, promiscuity is quite a common response.
Yeah, most definitely. I've dealt with many women that you know, have been able to relate to that being a thing. Also, I was married for 23 years, and I can honestly say now, looking back at that relationship, I was more or less the opposite. You know, I was very much in a guarded heart situation where I was quite numb when it come to intimacy, and you know, not wanting to feel too much, if that makes sense to you.
It does. I wanted to feel. I needed to feel. So my heart was open for new discoveries.
Well, it's lovely to hear, because I did get to that point, you know, once that relationship ended. Unfortunately, you know, I didn't enable that. I didn't have enough healing within that relationship to experience it within my marriage, because, you know, my ex-husband was a great man. You know, he was a lovely man. He treated me really well, and loving husband and great father. But I just didn't have the tools at that time, you know, to open my heart. It wasn't until I had a relationship subsequent to that I then realized, you know, that I hadn't been open, and I'd been living with a very guarded heart, and was very confused and unfulfilled, and didn't really know why in that relationship.
Yeah, it's part of that journey. You know, you've got to work through it, and you've got to work through the emotions of it.
So when you get any women that come to you, Lois, that have got, you know, previous sexual trauma, what's the first thing you do as regards, you know, if you can share with the audience what one or two exercises you might take them through, or questions that they might want to ask themselves to start that healing journey?
Well, there's three things that I want to share. The first two, one is to write down your feelings, your emotions, the facts of the situation, anything that comes to your mind. Write it down. It's very, very therapeutic to get it out of you onto a piece of paper. And also, if you're writing down your emotions, it's good to go back later and see how you've progressed. You know, maybe in 6 months or years' time, you're feeling, oh, life is dreadful. And you can go back and read what you read and say, wow, life was dreadful. It's now not so dreadful. So you can actually measure progress. So writing is very, very good. You have to share it with anybody. I wrote from the first night, and I put it into a book. I wrote it in journal format, and it became a book. But you don't have a healer, a family member, a friend. If you've got no one to talk to, yourself in the mirror, or a cat or a dog, by talking, you are putting it out into the universe, and it helps. The universe takes some of that negative energy away from you, and it helps the healing process. It is so healing and therapeutical to just let go by just saying, whatever, I hate this, whatever, this happened, this was a load of whatever, and say whatever you want to, share it, your feelings, your thoughts, just get it out of you, and let it dissipate into. And then the third thing is far more structured, and that is dealing with the emotions. You've got to feel those emotions. If you are angry, you've got to feel that anger. You can't just say, it'll go away. Time is not a healer. It's not about time or space. It's about dealing with it. Because if you don't deal with it, you will be triggered when something happens 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line. Something happens that reminds you of that situation, and that anger and all those, whatever those negative emotions are, just bubble back. And you just can't cope. So you need to manage those emotions and deal with them and get rid of them. So I talk people through the whole concept of visualization and using all your senses. It's like, where does it feel? I feel like I'm a pot of boiling water. I feel like I was punched in the gut. I feel like sandpaper. Try and describe what it feels like. What does it sound like? It sounds like a cat screeching. It smells like rotten eggs. Really get to feel that emotion with all your senses, and rate it on a scale. I'm feeling so for example, after I was raped, I was filled with rage, real red boiling rage at a 20 out of a 10. and that forced me, it made me become an activist, and I became an activist straight away, wanting to change the world. And while I've been an activist, but in the meantime, I brought my and then finally, because I was dealing with it, I wasn't hiding from that emotion. I was saying, okay, this is what that emotion is doing. So you need to feel it, and just don't stay there too long. If you stay there too long, it becomes part of you. So as part of that, the next phase of that is to now find the replacement emotion. So instead of rage and anger, what do you want to feel? I want to feel acceptance, or understanding, or what is it that I want to feel? Why did he do it? Because he, hurt people. So he was hurt. So if I understand that he was hurt, maybe I will reduce that anger and replace it with more compassionate feelings. And when you do the positive feelings, here I recommend all the good tools of vision boards and affirmations, and do it. We do it for partners and our careers, but why don't we do it for our emotions as well? What emotions? I want to feel the sun shining on my face, and I want to hear the birds twittering, and I want to smell freshly baked bread. What is it that you want to feel? And create a vision board around that emotion that you want to feel, and then write up a nice affirmation statement about it. Put it on your screen, on your desk. My affirmation as my alarm clock. So I wake up to my affirmation every morning on my phone, which is fabulous. So it sets you up for that wonderful start to the day just by having that affirmation. So those are the steps, is getting control of those emotions sooner than later.
Excellent. I love all that wisdom and advice. That's brilliant. One of the things as well I can add to that is that, as part of your journaling, if you actually write letters again, which you're never going to send, about your perpetrator and how you feel and felt about them. Another exercise that I get, women to do that if they've been through any sort of similar trauma is burn either that journal or that letter, as part of the letting go process. So it just gives them an extra feeling of power to know that they're actually letting it go by destroying that journal or that letter or letters and releasing it.
Yeah, it's ritual. Ritual is so important. I was attacked in my place of work, and I was working late one night in the courtyard, and so that place was now an ugly place, and I held a ritualistic party there, and I invited all the people who had been there for me and helped me, and we had this wonderful party, and somebody even made a really dangerous cocktail and we called it Lois's Revenge. We all got very drunk on this cocktail, and we had a party, and I wrote a poem to all my friends who helped me, and afterwards it was okay. So rituals really help release whatever it is. So writing a letter and either burning it or doing something with it is a ritualistic movement, which definitely releases some of the angst and pain.
Yeah, and I think the same, like you said, for changing the way your space feels to you, especially if you're going to be using it afterwards, can also make a difference. So if you've been attacked in your home, for example, and it was in your bedroom, you can always, do things around that room to change the atmosphere of it, whether that's scented candles or, having, some cuddly toys to cuddle up to whilst you're sleeping, changing the position of your bed or redecorating the room to create a different ambience around it.
Absolutely. And it doesn't have to be big things, little things, just changing the as you say, the placement of the bed. It just makes it better. It's a different bed, it's a different place.
Yes.
Different memory.
Yeah, because I do think sometimes, women suffer with nightmares and want to know how they can, sleep better and not have tormented nights where they can't sleep. And I always suggest, things that, like you said, creating a routine that's a positive routine, whether that's having a bubble bath leading up to, going to bed and having a hot chocolate and, as I said before, scented candles for, changing the smell of the room and, just to change that routine changes the pattern and therefore can enable you to get a good night's sleep just by shifting that routine. It changes the thoughts you even have leading up to going to bed.
It just reminded me, after I was attacked, I was covered in blood and my hair was matted with blood. And my friends tried to wash the blood out and we couldn't get the blood out. And so they cut my hair and I was devastated because I love my long hair and I really didn't want it to be cut, but they were so fed up with trying to get everything out that they cut it. And again, that is such a ritualistic thing. Cut your hair, change it, he pulled my hair, and so get rid of that association. It's very good. So it was a good move that they cut my hair.
So even though you mourned the loss of your long hair, you actually then changed your thoughts around it and celebrated the fact that, you felt empowered on the back of it eventually.
So my new lesson or my new passion in life now, I keep thinking, why are we helping people recover and heal from these dreadful atrocities? And so I'm going forward in a more positive light and I'm saying, let's stop the atrocities happening in the first place. And so I've come up with this concept of brave. If we can teach everybody to be brave, we can stop this gender-based violence. And so B stands for boundaries. Know what your boundaries are, know what the other person's boundaries are. And then R is respect those boundaries. A is agreement. V is values, know your values and your partner's values. And E is equality. I've got a few other letters that I've added on, but if you can live to that brave formula, we can stop this. We can make people more compassionate and have more empathy and understanding. And it all ends up being about communication. You know, if we can communicate to our partner what we want, what we like, what we don't like, what we expect, and we can communicate openly and honestly.
I think that that's a very great acronym that you've come up with there. So it's a good standard to live by. I love that. And it isn't fair, I don't think, to, you know, on the back of these atrocities, become a man basher, is it? Because what I do see, you know, is women now becoming, you know, creatures who are bashing men for being the perpetrators of these crimes. And obviously, that's only a small percentage of men that have committed these crimes. It's not all men. And I don't like to see that.
No, absolutely. You can't paint everybody with the same brush. And, you know, I do feel so sorry for men because they get confused, because women, you know, with the whole feminist movement and all the changing and the Me Too movements and everything, they don't know where they stand anymore. You know, can you touch a person on the shoulder? They don't know if they can do that. And also, what is respect? So, you know, the man opens the car door and the woman says, I can open my own door, being the independent woman. And then the next time he doesn't open someone's door and she says, what's wrong with you? Why don't you open my door? And so the poor man is confused. He doesn't know what to do anymore. And that's why communication is so important. Let people know what your boundaries and expectations are.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your wise words of wisdom and for being prepared to be vulnerable enough to share your own story, Lois. I really appreciate that. So for those women that would like to know more about you and perhaps get in touch, what would be your best contact information?
Very easy to find me. Walkingwithoutskin.com is my webpage. It's my Facebook page. It's the name of my book. So if you Google that, you'll find me.
Love it. That makes it so easy. So easy. Thank you so much, Lois. It's been a pleasure to have you on as a guest today.
Thank you, Lyn, and you're doing great work with this podcast, and let's hope the message gets through to everybody and that we can all learn to forgive and to fly free.
I second that wholeheartedly. So listeners, just leaves me to say that true love starts with opening our hearts. And until next time, goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Hearts Entwined podcast. You can follow Lyn via the Facebook group Two Hearts Entwined, or search Lyn Smith, inspirational speaker, at LinkedIn, or email lyn@hearts-entwined.com. That's LYN@hearts-entwined.com. Remember, true love starts with opening our hearts.